This is Tracy Halesvass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico. Today I'm talking to Cindy Burkart Maynard about her book, Soyala, Daughter of the Desert. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I enjoyed reading Soyala, Daughter of the Desert. Is that how you pronounce her?
Soyala, yes.
But she was a wonderful person. I really got to know her well through the pages of the book.
Well, thank you. That's very gratifying. You know, that's what you aim for.
It was very realistic. Before we even talk about the book itself, I'm so curious about the research, because you must have done a lot of that.
I did a lot of research. The research went on for about a year, and I actually at one point, made a list of all of the books that I kind of at least glanced at, or read, more or less completely, and there were 41 books.
Oh, my.
I have a bibliography at the end of those, and that's just the ones that I relied on the most. So, yes, it was as factual as I could make it, given that this was in the 1200s.
Yes.
And, of course, no one was there to read. Well, there were people there, but no one recorded,
right,
in writing what was going on.
Right. Very impressive. Well, first, before we go further, why don't you give the audience a little synopsis of the book?
Okay. In the late 1200s, early 1300s, the Four Corners area of the Southwest was largely depopulated. There had been a fairly large number of people living in that area. I have read anywhere between 30,000 and 200,000 people living in the Four Corners area, and they more or less en masse got up and left. Now, not completely, of course, and other newer immigrants came in, but there was a big mass migration. That was very curious to me, and there have been a lot of speculation about that. Nobody knows for sure. But also, I visited Salmon Ruin, I believe it's pronounced.
Salmon Ruins, yes.
Salmon Ruin in near Farmington. And, browsing around the bookstore, I discovered that it had a really interesting history and a really dramatic end. So that caught my attention, and I thought, well, there's a good story here, and if I can, try to recreate it, what would it have been like to live in this place and time? And, of course, it's, entirely speculation, except for that, and I've beefed it up with as much research as I could. But that's what the story is about. So it's about a young woman, actually 3 generations of women, who lived during this period of leading up to the mass migration. And it's her life story and her daughter.
Now, they're Pueblo people, right? And
yes.
Are the places they are, is it in Chaco or is it up here in Aztec ruins?
Okay, the Salmon Ruin is what is referred to in the book as the Old Pueblo. And that's the location of the activity in the book. It's the people that are talked about in the book, or that about whom the book revolves, are the San Juan native people, not the Chacoans.
Okay.
So the Chaco culture was based in Chaco Canyon to the south. Salmon Ruin was actually built by the Chacoans, but then they left, and the native people, the indigenous people who had always been living there, moved in. It was called the secondary occupation. And that's what this book is about. Those people.
And we pick up just right in the middle of their lives when they're doing their daily work.
When Soyala is about, 10, 12 years old.
Right. And they're harvesting corn They have busy lives, and I'm sure that you thought about that a lot, finding what they ate and how they harvested, and they were really busy.
Well, I know. Put yourself in their place.
Exactly.
What would you have done?
Right.
What would you have done? You had, and of course, one thing that's wonderful about Salmon Ruins is that Cynthia Irwin Williams, archaeologist, spent 27 years archaeologizing that site. So she has described in huge detail everything that was found in every one of the almost 200 rooms, and so the physical culture was easy to reproduce because she dug up every pollen of grain, every pollen grain, every yucca sandal,
right.
everything that was every potsherd, everything that was in there. So there was lots to go on.
That's fascinating, putting together a story from those remnants and understanding what they ate by what they've left behind and what they wore and how they would have made what they wore.
Right. Lots of skills. So, they weren't ignorant or primitive in any way. It was a very highly developed culture, and they had a lot of skills.
And you portrayed them very intelligently.
Sure, they were just every bit as intelligent as you or I,
I think
or
so.
Those know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, of course, Hania.
Hania, yes, he's a kind of an enigmatic figure.
He is.
He was, the man of mystery. During this time, they were going into a 50-year drought, and there was a fair amount of stress on all of the Pueblo people around the area. And because of that stress, there was some raiding, and in the raiding, people, preyed on one another, tried to acquire their goods and food. And so Hania was displaced from his village, and he wandered around a while until he found Soyala's people. And they accepted him sort of grudgingly.
Mm-hmm.
And then as he developed into a kind of shaman. He was a shaman's apprentice in the dwellings where he lived, from which he was displaced, and he sort of developed in that direction and became a kind of a seer.
What idea or how'd you come up with him?
I don't know. I don't. I've written a couple of other books, and I'm working on a third, and it always happens that you write the arc of the story, you write the timeline, you integrate the fictional timeline with the historic timeline, because I like to write historic fiction,
mm-hmm.
and then you go along thinking, okay, I've got this story figured out, and then all of a sudden, things happen that you weren't anticipating.
It's true,
so
isn't
it's
it?
like the muse of the story just sort of takes over at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And Hania was a result of that kind of process. It was just, he popped up, he appeared, and so he got in the story.
Yeah, he's a very real person. That's why I was wondering where he came from. I love him.
Yes, I read some autobiographical works by Zuni and Hopi people,
mm-hmm.
and of course they had shamans,
right.
and they had a mystical type of relationship with the unseen world,
mm-hmm.
and they had visions, and they had seers, and they had holy men, and they had healers, and so none of those functions are made up. It's just the character was made up, of course.
And he enhanced Soyala's character, but they all became very real.
It was short. It was a short book, so I figured if nothing else, it's a quick read.
But it covers a very long period of time.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
That's very good. Well, would you like to read something from Soyala for us?
All right, so this is just the first couple pages of the first chapter. A half-grown girl, midway between childhood and adulthood, dropped to her knees in the sandy red dirt of the dry arroyo. She brought her ruddy face close to a spindly shrub. Something had captured her attention. As she sprawled on the ground, her tawny skin blended into the rusty earth. Summer had almost passed, and each of the shrub's branches was crowded with dense clusters of papery seeds. She hardly blinked as she scrutinized the industrious spider stringing its web from branch to branch. It worked with stubborn determination, never pausing as it stretched silky filaments from one spoke of its wheel to the next. The small red ants that owned this patch of ground were starting to take little bites out of her outstretched legs when one small victim fluttered into the spider's web. The spider darted toward the struggling form and wrapped in a miniature cocoon faster than the girl could say her name, Soyala. Soyala bounded up from under her bush and called excitedly, running toward her mother, working on the cornfield. "Mama, Mama!" Her slim, strong body fairly flew over the rock-strewn earth, dust flying up beneath her heels. "Guess what I just saw? A spider captured a fly and wrapped it in a little blanket. Come see." Her mother, a small, sturdy woman with long black braids and the weathered skin of one who has lived her life under the sun, lifted her eyes from a patch of corn she was tending. She did not respond to her daughter's excited call. Rather, like a dog who had just heard a rabbit rustle in the bushes, her head shot up, and she stared intently to the east for a moment. Suddenly she sprinted toward Soyala and unceremoniously grabbed her wrist. With the powerful grip of a woman who has spent her lifetime working with her hands, Soyala's mother, Muna, dragged the girl into the rocky arroyo. Muna shoved the girl behind a great slab of sandstone that had tumbled from the cliff face above. It now rested at the bottom of the arroyo, canted on its edge at a precarious angle that left just enough room for Soyala and Muna to squeeze in behind. "Mama," cried the little girl, "what's happening?" "Hush, Soyala, don't make a sound. We can't let them find us," Muna hissed, her face contorted into a grimace. And that's how it opened.
We are hooked.
Yeah, and so something happened.
Yes.
And it was, it was a raid, and then it progresses from there.
It does. It determines a lot of what happens from then on.
Yeah.
One thing that you've done really well in the book also is describe the settings.
Yes, I'm real familiar with the Four Corners area. My husband and I have spent a lot of time down there. And I'm really interested in ethnobotany, and I did a lot of research on the plants. So anyone familiar with the area will recognize these plants. And they have medicinal uses and practical uses, and I tried to incorporate some of that into the book, and that does make it, I hope, a little more realistic.
Well, I think it's interesting. Muna was a healer, and she did use the plants, and I could tell that there'd been some knowledge put behind that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, there are some wonderful books written on ethnobotany of that area.
And then you described the sunsets and sunrises beautifully.
Yeah.
I thought,
well, you live in that area.
I
you
do.
know how gorgeous the skies are.
Yes, so I can tell that you were familiar with it. You and Bob have your other book, Ancient Skies Through Ancient Eyes, in which you look at petroglyphs. I'm wondering how those relate to Soyala's story.
I didn't include petroglyph making in this story, although I could have. I might have. I just didn't. The petroglyphs are really enigmatic. No one really understands what they signified, why exactly people were making these things. It was not an insignificant undertaking to sit all day in the hot sun and peck away at these,
Right.
somewhat complicated patterns in the rock,
Mm-hmm.
and they all had meaning.
Yes.
And so I kind of just didn't want to tackle it.
I understand that. Do you think, though,
Yeah.
in reality, that era would have had petroglyphs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I
Interesting.
think so. Yes.
Mhm.
Although the books about rock art that I have seen, a lot of them they start being created in the 800s or even earlier.
Right.
So so they cover a long period of time, and like all forms of human expression, they go through phases and they change over time.
Right.
So yeah, it was a big topic that I kind of shied away from.
I can understand that. That would be a rabbit hole to go through, right?
Yeah.
But-
Next book, maybe.
But in between those two books, you have Anastasia Book of Days, and that's completely...
Yeah, Anastasia's Book of Days.
Yes, and that's set in a completely different setting.
It is. That Anastasia's Book of Days is a historic fiction based on the life of my great-great-grandmother.
Oh.
And, yeah, so I had all of the time. She lived for 73 years in the end of 1700s and through the three-quarters of the way through the next century. And there was a lot going on. She was in the Black Forest area of southwestern Germany, and there was just a lot of history happening. And the nice thing about, or the easier thing about that book was that there is a lot of written history. It's all written down, and there was a lot of family history as well.
Oh, neat.
But I thought she had an interesting story too. She had 3 sons, one of whom died in infancy. But she had 3 sons, one of whom is my great-grandfather. He's the one who immigrated to this country.
Oh.
And she was never married.
Oh, my.
And I thought, well, that is really odd.
Yes, for that day and age, yes.
This region and in this period of time was really,
Right.
really conservative. That was fun.
And what's coming next? You said you're working on something now?
Oh, yes, I am. I haven't got a title. My kind of the working title I'm working with is Wild Child, but that won't stick. That's inadequate.
Okay.
But it is a story about a young girl. That's all I can write about, I guess. I'll have to
You do it
if I get
well.
a little better at it. Maybe I can get some other major characters. But it's in the Basque region.
Oh.
Just south of the Pyrenees, along the border between France and Spain. And during a period of time, roughly the same period of time that Soyala was written, but in a completely different part of the world. And the Basque people were the last people in that area to be Christianized. They held on to their pre-Christian religions for a really long time, into the 1400s. And so the basic theme of the book is that conflict or struggle between the native belief systems and Christianization.
Oh, interesting.
But it's kind of more of an action-adventure sort of thing.
Oh. Is it an epic, and does it cover generations as Soyala does?
No, I don't think it will.
Okay.
I think it's just this one period of time, yeah. Yeah. So I've walked the Camino de Santiago,
Oh, good
which
for you.
goes from the Pyrenees across northern Spain to Santiago, Spain, on the west coast.
Uh-huh.
And so this covers that same, it's not about the Camino, but it covers that same period that same part of the country.
Well, that's fascinating, the way you've chosen different cultures and really immersed yourself into them, even though ancient they are, and then write about them so believably. So what's your writing process? Do you write all the time?
It's a hard question to answer. I never quite know what people are expecting for an answer. But what I do is I get up in the morning, first thing, get a cup of coffee and a piece of toast or something and sit at my desk
Mm-hmm.
first thing, and just spend at least 2 hours, sometimes much more, just being with that story.
Right.
Very often, that little, I don't know, kind of semi-conscious state that you get into
Yes.
before you completely wake up
Right.
and you're sort of not quite asleep, not quite awake. That's a wonderful creative period of time for your brain. So I start thinking about the story then. And your brain isn't quite thoroughly... Yeah, it's a great time to think about what's happening next in your story. Because what happens to me anyway, is I don't think in terms of the arc of the story or all the technicalities of writing. You think in terms of scenes. It's like dreams, kind of. The scenes are appearing to you as if it was a movie or something, and
Right.
it makes it a great place to start. Yeah, first thing in the morning, sit down and just immerse.
It's interesting how each author has a different writing process.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think early mornings really do add to the creativity.
Right. For me, they do. Some people are night owls, but I don't function well after about 5 o'clock
Right.
in the afternoon. I'm kind of done for the day.
Oh, I do want to mention one thing. You have a website, cindymaynard.net, where listeners and readers can find you. And where would they find Soyala and your other books?
Well, they're all on my website.
Okay.
And that's my preferred way of having people buy them. But of
Great.
course, they're all available on Amazon as well. And yeah, those are Amazon, Goodreads. Those are the main places. And then I have the book in some libraries and bookstores locally here in the Front Range, and we'll be getting them out there in the Four Corners area soon as well. It's just delightful talking to you. You ask great questions, and
Thank you.
I'm really happy for the opportunity, and thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to read such a wonderful book. I enjoyed it very much.
And I'll keep you posted on the next one.
Please do. Thank you, Cindy.
Okay.
Thank you. And that was Cindy Maynard talking about her book, Soyala, Daughter of the Desert. This is Tracy Hales Vass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico.